A bakery in Parker is considered one of the best in the country, and they've got a new accolade to prove it.
Have you ever wondered if the warm smell of fresh bread is hiding something you would rather not know? For decades, bakery counters have been a part of our mornings, our celebrations, and those small, everyday comforts we barely think about. But what happens when the stories behind the counter are not as sweet as the pastries we remember? Today at the Hidden Menu, we take a deep dive into bakery chains to avoid at all costs and two that are actually worth it. So let us start with 1. Cinnabon Avoid. There is something about the smell of a Cinnabon stand that can stop you in your tracks. For many, that first whiff brings back mall trips in the 90s, airport layovers that felt a little less lonely, or Saturday afternoons when a warm cinnamon roll felt like a small celebration. But over the years, some regulars have noticed changes that do not always make it into the glossy menu boards. Reviews suggest that portions have quietly shifted, rolls that once seemed almost too big to finish, now fitting neatly in one hand. Former employees have shared that dough is now often shipped in frozen rather than made fresh on site, and glaze formulas have been adjusted to cut costs. Some customers say the rolls feel drier, with less of the gooey center that made them famous. And prices, even with occasional promotions, have crept upward while those small changes slip by unnoticed. One traveler recalled ordering their usual at an airport kiosk, only to realize it tasted far more like bread with sugar than the decadent pastry they remembered. In busy mall locations, the baking aroma still lures people in, but insiders say much of that scent comes from timed heating and product rotation rather than a constant flow of fresh trays. None of this stops fans from lining up because nostalgia has a way of glossing over small disappointments. Yet, for those who remember the original indulgence, each bite now comes with a quiet question. Has it changed? Or have we? 2. Magnolia Bakery. Avoid. Magnolia Bakery has long been a symbol of New York charm. Pastel counters, generous swirls of frosting, and that banana pudding that made its way into countless Instagram feeds. Tourists still line up outside, especially in the West Village, clutching their phones for that perfect shot. But many locals have noticed a quiet shift behind the display cases. Reviews suggest that as the brand has expanded, both in the city and internationally, the quality has not always followed at the same pace. Former staff members have mentioned that some items are now produced in centralized kitchens and shipped to stores, losing the freshness that once defined them. Frosting recipes have been tweaked for easier storage, and certain seasonal cupcakes arrive already decorated, leaving less room for the personal touch. Prices, always high for a single cupcake, now feel harder to justify when the texture or flavor falls short of the memory. One longtime customer recalled buying their favorite chocolate cupcake only to find the cake dense and dry, far from the tender crumb they knew. The shop still hums with that cozy energy and the banana pudding remains a star. But when every other visitor is there for a photo, it can feel less like a neighborhood bakery and more like a brand in motion. Nostalgia is still for sale, but it might not always taste the same as it used to. 3. Au Bon Pain. Avoid. There was a time when Au Bon Pain was everywhere, bright cafe lights spilling onto sidewalks, baskets of fresh baguettes, and a menu that made lunch feel like a small escape to Europe. For office workers, travelers, and students, it was a comfortable middle ground between fast food and fine dining. But in recent years, customers have reported a steady thinning of both menu variety and quality. Former employees have spoken about corporate wide ingredient substitutions like frozen pastries replacing fresh bakes, or soups arriving prepackaged instead of simmering in house. Some locations now limit baking to once or twice a day, leaving displays looking tired by mid afternoon. Reviews suggest portion sizes have shrunk too, sandwiches that once overflowed with fillings now feeling sparse. And while prices have inched upward, the warm bread baskets that used to sit by the register have quietly disappeared in some cafes. Even the once inviting seating areas can feel stripped down, with fewer tables and less charm. It is still possible to find a good meal at Au Bon Pain, but the little touches that made it special for decades seem to be slipping away. For many, the loss is not just about the food. It is about realizing that the comforting ritual they relied on has quietly changed when they were not looking. 4. Panera Bread. Avoid. Panera Bread built its reputation on fresh baked bread, cozy cafes, and the promise of a healthier, fast casual option. People came for the soup in a bread bowl, the free Wi Fi before it was everywhere, and that feeling of lingering over lunch without being rushed. But longtime customers have noticed some quiet shifts. Reviews suggest that many baked goods now arrive at stores par-baked from off-site facilities, with final baking done in-store just to warm them through. Former bakers have shared that overnight baking, once a signature feature, has been scaled back or eliminated in some locations. Seasonal menu items often return slightly altered, sometimes with cheaper ingredients or smaller serving sizes. One customer recalled ordering the same broccoli cheddar soup for years, only to realize one day it was thinner, with fewer chunks of broccoli. The "you pick two" deal, once seen as a generous value, now comes with noticeably smaller portions. While Panera still markets itself as a place for clean, wholesome food, the quiet changes have left some feeling that the warmth is more in the branding than the bread. The cafe atmosphere is still there, but for those who remember the early days, there is a lingering sense that the recipe for what made Panera special has been slowly rewritten. If any of these bakery tales have stirred a memory or made you rethink a favorite stop, leave a comment with your own experience. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so you can follow the rest of the story. 5. Einstein Brothers Bagels. Avoid. For many, the morning ritual of stopping by Einstein Brothers Bagels feels like a small piece of comfort. Stepping into the warm, toasty air, the smell of fresh bagels hanging in the space like an old friend. Years ago, you might have watched bakers pulling steaming trays straight from the oven, slicing them open, and layering them with generous spreads. But regulars have noticed that the baking process has shifted quietly over the years. Former employees have shared that dough often arrives preformed and frozen, baked off in batches that can sit for hours before being served. Reviews suggest that texture has suffered. Bagels that were once crisp on the outside and chewy inside now feel softer, more like bread rolls than the dense, traditional style people remember. Cream cheese options, once a rainbow of freshly whipped flavors, are now often pre-packaged in small containers. Prices have steadily crept upward, yet portion sizes and topping quantities have inched downward. Some customers recall ordering a signature sandwich that seemed fuller in the past, with more fillings and fresh-cut ingredients, only to find today's version lighter and assembled more quickly. Even the coffee, once part of the draw, has shifted to centralized brewing methods that former staff say are about speed, not flavor. The bright signs and friendly staff still make for a pleasant start to the day, but for those who remember the older stores, there is a sense that the heart of the ritual has been streamlined into something more efficient and somehow less satisfying. Like a photo you keep in a drawer, the memory is there, but when you look closely, it has faded around the edges. 6. Auntie Anne's Avoid. The first bite of an Auntie Anne's pretzel can transport you back to wandering a mall on a Saturday afternoon, warm paper bag in hand, salt crystals catching in the light. The smell drifts down the concourse, pulling you toward the counter, even if you were just passing by. But some frequent customers say the experience feels different now. Former employees have mentioned that the dough, once mixed and kneaded in store, is now often delivered pre-mixed, requiring only shaping and baking. This change saves time but can subtly shift texture, with pretzels sometimes lacking the same depth of flavor. Reviews suggest butter coating is applied more sparingly, and in busier locations, trays of pretzels may sit under heat lamps longer than they used to, leaving them drier. Seasonal or specialty flavors can cost significantly more, yet the portion size remains the same, or in some cases, slightly smaller. One shopper recalled ordering their favorite cinnamon sugar pretzel, only to find it had less sugar than before, with staff explaining it was part of new portion guidelines. Even the dipping sauces, once ladled from larger tubs, are now often pre-measured into smaller cups, making it harder to enjoy without stretching it thin. Mall food courts are fading in many places, and with them, the magic of certain treats. The signs are still bright, the smell is still there, but the little indulgence that felt like an event now feels more like a product. Predictable, standardized, and a little less personal. And for those who grew up on that first soft, buttery bite, that change is not just about taste. It is about losing a small ritual of joy. 7. Crumble cookies. Avoid. When crumble cookies first appeared, it felt like a sweet surprise. Oversized cookies in rotating flavors, pink boxes you could barely close, and a sense that you were getting something bold and fresh each week. Social media helped fuel the excitement, with customers posting their flavor hauls like they were sharing rare treasures. But as the chain expanded, some fans have noticed a quiet shift in the experience. Reviews suggest that quality can vary widely between locations, with some cookies arriving underbaked or overly dry depending on staff training and equipment. Former employees have mentioned that certain recipes are designed for mass production and storage, rather than being baked entirely from scratch on site. Prices have also climbed, making a small box of cookies a more expensive indulgence than it once felt. Some customers report that flavors are repeated more often now, and the novelty that drove the brand's buzz has dulled. And while the presentation is still photo ready, a few regulars say the cookies feel sweeter but less balanced, as if leaning more on sugar than complexity of flavor. It is still an event to open that pink box, but the thrill of discovery, the sense that you are tasting something truly new, can feel harder to find. Like a favorite song played too often, the charm is still there, but it does not always hit the same way it once did. 8. Le pain quotidien. Avoid. Le Pain Quotidien has long been a haven for those who wanted a European cafe experience without leaving their neighborhood. Rustic breadboards, communal tables, and coffee served in wide, handleless bowls. It was a place where you could linger over tartines or sip a cappuccino while sunlight filtered through the window. But in recent years, the chain's expansion and restructuring have brought quiet changes. Former staff have shared that some breads are now par-baked off-site, losing the crisp crust and warm, yeasty aroma that once defined the brand. Menu offerings have been simplified, with certain seasonal or regional dishes disappearing altogether. Reviews suggest portion sizes on salads and tartines have been reduced, sometimes without any change in menu description. Prices, however, have risen steadily, making a casual lunch feel more like a splurge. In busier locations, service can feel rushed, with less of the gentle pace that once encouraged you to stay a while. One longtime customer recalled ordering their favorite avocado toast, only to find thinner bread, less topping, and a drizzle of oil instead of the generous spread they remembered. The wooden tables and warm lighting are still there, but for those who loved Le Pain for its slow, handcrafted feel, there is a sense that the bakery cafe has become more about efficiency than experience. And while the food can still be good, the quiet charm, the thing that made you want to stay an extra half hour sometimes feels like it is slipping through the cracks. 9. Great American Cookies. Avoid. For anyone who grew up near a shopping mall, the Great American Cookies counter was a beacon. Glass cases filled with brightly frosted cookie slices, trays of chewy chocolate chip rounds, and those giant cookie cakes decorated for every occasion. Standing in line, you could watch staff frost each piece with a swirl, the air heavy with the scent of sugar and butter. But longtime customers have started noticing quiet changes. Reviews suggest that in many locations, the cookie dough is now made in centralized facilities and shipped frozen, which former employees say can flatten the flavor and texture compared to the in-store batches of the past. Some regulars mention that frosting, once thick and buttery, now leans toward a sweeter, more artificial taste, designed to hold up longer in the display. Portions can feel smaller, too. A wedge from a cookie cake that once required two hands to steady, now slipping easily onto a small napkin. Prices have crept up with little fanfare, and some shoppers say the variety of flavors has narrowed, focusing on the fastest sellers instead of the quirky seasonal choices they remember. In busier malls, display cases may stay stocked all day, meaning your fresh cookie might have been sitting for hours under the glass. The friendly smiles are still there, and the nostalgia still works, just enough to keep you coming back. But for those who remember the soft give of a cookie baked that morning, it is hard to ignore the quiet shift toward convenience over craft. 10. Paris Baguette. Avoid. Paris Baguette arrived in the United States promising a blend of French style and Asian bakery flair. Glass cases of flaky croissants, delicate fruit tarts, and elaborately decorated cakes. For a while, stepping inside felt like finding a little corner of Paris in your own neighborhood. But as the chain has grown, reviews suggest that the charm has thinned in places. Former employees have shared that many pastries are shipped frozen from central production facilities, then baked or finished in store. While the look remains glossy and tempting, the flavor and texture can suffer. Croissants that shatter less, cream fillings that feel more uniform than fresh. Prices are high enough to make the purchase feel like a treat, but portion sizes can be smaller than expected. Customers have noted that fruit toppings are sometimes more sparse, and delicate garnishes have been scaled back. The self-service display model, while efficient, also means pastries can sit longer before being chosen, losing the just-made freshness. The space still offers the bright lighting, clean counters, and that sense of indulgence, but some say it feels more like a pastry showroom than a bakery. For those who remember the early days of the brand, the shift is subtle but real. What was once a rare and charming find now feels in certain ways more like another polished stop in a chain of many. 11. Porto's Bakery. Worth it. Porto's Bakery is one of those places that locals speak about with a kind of pride, and visitors hear about almost like a secret tip. Known for its Cuban pastries, savory potato balls, and generously portioned cakes, Porto's has managed to grow without losing much of its warmth. Reviews from regulars often mention how, despite the long lines, the quality has stayed remarkably consistent over the years. Former employees share stories about bakers starting before dawn, crafting pastries and breads in-house rather than relying solely on pre-made items. The prices remain reasonable compared to many upscale bakeries, making it possible for families to leave with a box full of treats without feeling like they overspent. Even with expansion, the flavor profiles remain distinct. Guava and cheese pastries that taste as rich and balanced as ever. Sandwiches piled high enough to share. The cafe spaces, though bustling, still invite people to linger, catching up over strong coffee and fresh pastelitos. Seasonal offerings rotate in, but Porto's keeps its core favorites steady, allowing customers to rely on the comfort of what they love. It is not perfect. Busy days can mean waits, and popular items sometimes sell out. But those feel like the signs of a place still making things the way people want them, rather than the way a cost sheet says they should. For many, Porto's is proof that a growing bakery chain can still hold onto the heart of what made it special in the first place. 12. Levain Bakery. Worth it. Levain Bakery began as a small New York shop, famous for massive, gooey cookies that felt almost too indulgent to finish in one sitting. Word spread fast, and soon lines wrapped around the block, with customers braving the wait for a warm paper bag filled with what many consider the gold standard of cookies. As Levain expanded, fans worried it might lose its magic, but reviews suggest the chain has largely kept its focus on what it does best. Former staff have described a consistent emphasis on baking in small batches throughout the day, keeping the cookies warm and fresh rather than flooding the display at opening. The texture, crispy edges giving way to a rich, soft center, remains a hallmark, and flavors stay true to the originals, with only a few carefully chosen seasonal additions. Prices are undeniably high, but most customers feel the size and quality make it worth it. Even in new cities, the design of each shop echoes the original's cozy feel, avoiding the overly corporate look that often comes with scaling up. There is still a sense of occasion in unwrapping that wax paper and breaking into a cookie, steam curling in the air. While not every expansion story ends well, Levain has managed to hold on to the details that matter. The careful baking, the generous portions, and the feeling that you are getting something made with real care. For those chasing a treat that lives up to the memory it still delivers. Before you go, share the bakery story you still tell your friends. Tap the like button if you have ever tasted a change you could not quite explain. And subscribe to the hidden menu so you never miss what is really baking behind the counter. And remember, the truth is not always on the menu.